and easy, chewable bits that we can be able to digest as a people in the public sphere. My name is Emmanuel Kutosi, holding brief for Nsongo Mokeria, and today we have quite the discussion looking on matters of integrity, leadership, and of course, matters of corruption. Welcome. Okay, and today we have the honor of having a mind that can be able to break this down for us. I'm honored to join Dr. Eric Kibet, the Dean of Law at the ZTech University, to break to us matters concerning this particular topic of concern. Karibu, Dr.
Thank you very much. It's really a pleasure to be here.
Mm-hmm. And perhaps to kick it off with speed, Dr. Eric, there's this terminology: he is acquitted, so he is clean, or she is acquitted, so she is clean. Is this always true?
No. Acquittal is a technical term. It means, in law, after a trial, on the basis of evidence admitted in court, somebody has been found to be innocent. But that does not necessarily mean that they did not commit the act. It means, as per evidence, the charges were not proved. And that could be that the prosecution did not do a good job as far as convincing the court that somebody is guilty. So acquittal does not necessarily mean you did not commit. It just means it was not proven that you committed.
Thank you for debunking that, because it moves me to the soul of this conversation. As you have put me right, Chapter 6 of our Constitution is literally the spirit that gives our Constitution a backing, one of integrity, particularly in being able to envision leaders and those who are in particular offices that are of public nature in matters of ensuring that they are up to the task that they have. However, we find a sort of gap between what comes out from our Constitution, the 2010 Constitution, to what we see on the ground happening. Why, in your expert opinion, do we tend to perceive this gap from what is within the Constitution and what we see within the leaders that we have?
Emmanuel, thank you very much for that question. It's a question that bothers me, and it's a question that should bother us as Kenyans. Because over the last 25 years or so, we have enacted so many laws that seek to tame corruption, that seek to institute good governance, that seek to ensure that there is integrity as far as public affairs is concerned. And as I was walking here today, I did a quick count, and my count came to not less than 10 different acts of parliament, and also many more regulations under each, all of them trying to regulate the matter of corruption and to ensure that there is integrity in public affairs. But as you rightly observe, corruption is still a big, big problem in our country. In fact, it is a single threat that undermines development, undermines socio-economic development in our country. So you ask, what is the issue? And for those of us who read the good book, the Bible, there's an interesting story that a writer there, the Apostle Paul, notes, and he says, "Woe unto me, Paul, that the things I want to do, I don't do. And the things that I don't want to do, I find myself doing." And it seems to me that that is exactly the same situation that we are in as a country. We have written so many laws because we don't want corruption and we want to fight corruption. But at the end of the day, in reality, corruption is just not going away. And that then clearly means our problem is not inadequacy of law. Our problem is not a problem of law. There is more to it. And perhaps we need to now look beyond law and find out what else can we do to combat corruption.
And perhaps, Dr. since you've brought it out as the issue is quite wide, is it
seriously you put it in law? So it's not really a problem that we legislated matters of integrity, because one of the ways that you can achieve reduction in corruption is by ensuring that you have good laws that prohibit what needs to be prohibited, but also complemented with an effective implementation of law and ensuring that that law is implemented and those who are in breach are brought to account. So I don't see it as a problem that we regulated integrity. We need a deeper inquiry than that. The problem may not really be that we have put this in the law. The problem could just be in our social psyche as a society and as a country. And perhaps that is where we need to look.
And something that I'm also going to come, because you've talked about the laws themselves as being that remedy to be a guide of sorts. But something that is also out there, something that we are noting, or rather it actually in the public sphere, is that if you look at Chapter 6 as it is, the requirements are majorly based particularly on the public offices. I don't know, is it something that could not cut across that if public officers are required to be people of integrity, also the public itself would be under the same requirements? Why is it that for some reason it would seem like the only place that we see the application of these particular guidelines within that act is on the public offices? What is there a miss where the private sector is not involved, or is this by design?
Well, thank you again for that question. This is not really an omission, it is by design. By design because first and foremost, we have certain expectations on public officers. And the reason why the law focuses a lot on public officers, imposes an obligation on them, and punishes breach of some of those obligations is because matters of public governance are placed in the hands of public officers. Mm-hmm. And therefore, it is only natural, it is only logical that then you would expect to have law focusing more on the conduct of public officers, because that is the expectation we have in society. However, that is not to say obligations on them. But also to introduce a different twist to your question, and you observe correctly that majority of obligations of law are on public officers. But lately, there has also been an extension of that law to cover private persons. And the example I have in mind here is the Anti-Bribery Act and the regulations made under the Anti-Bribery Act. So that whether you are a public officer or a private person, it is a criminal offense to bribe or to receive a bribe. Of course, the recipient of a bribe would typically be a public officer. But the innovation of that law is that also for private persons offering a bribe, they commit an offense, and for which they can be held accountable. So in short, it applies across board, but of course certain obligations are more on public officers for the reason that they are public officers paid by the state to provide public services.
But wouldn't that bring about an imbalance of sorts? As in, I do not question the makers of the law because they are more informed than I. Probably that's why I'm inching to get that information. But I'm wondering, if we have state officers held to such a high pedestal, how can we create that balance, particularly for the private sector? And the other thing I would want to understand is that when we look at the laws as they are, there are very many laws that particularly look to ensure, one, these officers are of good conduct. We have the Conflict of Interest Act of 2025, among others. And there are quite a number of laws. But at the same time, it is not that corruption is being decreased, particularly within the specs of leadership. We still have questions concerning various issues, how they were come to. We have scandals that are yet to be resolved. So the question would be, despite the fact that we have these laws, we are not seeing, or rather perceiving, a decline in acts of corruption. So could this lack of balance be a creation of these laws heavily focusing on these state officers and not necessarily on the one who, for lack of a better word, would come with a candy and maybe draw them in to be part of matters that would not be that right in matters of integrity?
An interesting way to look at it. And in asking your question, it brings to my mind the question of distinction between law, morals, and ethics. Because remember, law is not made in a vacuum. It is made in a social context. So that what the society counts as morally reprehensible and desires to regulate eventually makes its way into law and becomes law. So I think it's very important for us to understand that law is not the only norm that regulates human behavior. We have morals, we have ethics, and then we have the law. But bear in mind that sometimes there can be an overlap between these three. And maybe just to quickly speak to it, when we talk about morals, we are talking about norms or an individual conception of what is right or wrong. And that individual conception of what is right or wrong eventually then becomes a societal conception of what is right or what is wrong. So that there are certain things that the society sees to be right and others to be wrong, acceptable or not acceptable. And some of these then eventually find their way into law, so that if there is sufficient political impetus, then some of the things that we consider to be morally unacceptable become also legally unacceptable and perhaps punished. So the situation that you point out, Emmanuel, I can explain it this way. If the moral fabric of a society is broken, it does not matter how much laws you have. It does not matter that you have good laws, because conduct arises from society. So that if the moral fabric and the conception of that society in terms of this is acceptable, this is not acceptable, the moral compass is shaky or even broken altogether, then the law will not help, however good and however well intended it may be. So in short, I see it as a problem that arises not first with the law, but the moral fabric of the society.
Well articulated. I believe you're speaking to concerns of our culture as a people that is speaking to the issues that we have. We're going to come back with that in a moment. We're taking our first break right here on Law Matters. Don't go too far, because we are about to dig in on the matters concerning how our moral fabric as a people could be a contributor to this matter of concern.
Kaka mtazamaji, popote ulipo, unapokuwa ukitazama Safina Show
inang'oa nanga sasa hivi. Ungana nami Albanas Mwania, nahodha wa Safina Show, nikutoe ng'ambo ya pili hadi ufuoni. Safina Show, sauti ya matumaini.
Miti miti, panda panda, miti miti. Our planet's future is in our hands. However, there is a threat to the brightness of this tomorrow. On Earth Check, we share the challenges, the solutions, and the hope.
I would call this a very momentous day, a very critical day.
Every episode, every story, every step we take creates a ripple. Join me, the environmentalist Emmanuel Kutosi, on KUTV every Wednesday at 8 p.m. and be part of Earth. Welcome. All right, welcome back to Law Matters, where we are looking particularly today on matters concerning leadership, integrity, and the vice that has been plaguing this particular republic for quite some time, and that is corruption. And today we are with Dr. Eric Kibet, the Dean of Law at the ZTech University, and we are breaking this down. Particularly this time around, Dr. we are working towards the moral fabric of the people. The law, as you've alluded to, is not created in a vacuum. It's created for these particular people. Where are we as a people? As in, are we, how do we handle that conversation of the matters of our culture in speaking to what we come to see, particularly in our leaders and the issues that we have concerning integrity?
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that question. Obviously, we have a wonderful country and we have a wonderful people. What fails us sometimes is that we are not honest enough. And one example I will give you is, you tell me, If today a truck carrying bread overturns somewhere in one of our highways and there is bread and the doors are open, what would you expect? That people will stand there and call the police or help themselves with the bread?
I think they'll collect the bread and look for
I
milk
think your
later.
guess is as good as mine. And that itself is a problem in that if we are not honest at the core, just in small things, then we shouldn't be surprised that there is problems of dishonesty in public affairs. If we are not honest in small things, change issues, small things about just speaking the truth or valuing the truth and being honest and just running on the basis of that what doesn't belong to me, I can't touch. If that is not universally accepted as a way to live, then we have a problem. And we shouldn't be surprised when we see huge scandals involving public officers, when we see mega corruption, and so on and so forth. Because the reasoning and the rationale is the same. If you cannot be trusted with, say, 10 shillings that fell off somebody's pocket, scandals was going upstairs, public then the day you are controlling 100 million shillings or 100 billion in a budget and so say in so government, we shouldn't expect that by some miracle you're honest. So it's a problem really of honesty, and maybe we need to ask ourselves, what can we do to create a more honest society and a society that values honesty? If we get that right, trust me, we will get it right as far as matters of integrity in public affairs is concerned.
And since we are having this discussion, Daktari, the matters of ill-gotten wealth, something that was not yours, but you're taking advantage of the situation to benefit yourselves. I'm looking at the fact that we really can't continue living this way. That's why I believe it has come as an issue that would also move into becoming, or rather generating a law to try and deter this particular action. I'm looking at institutions that we have, because we are speaking not only about the issue, but maybe about how we can resolve it or diminish it or reduce it by one way or another. We have institutions such as ZTech University. We have the Kenyatta University. We have various institutions. How can they speak to this issue? Because they are raising the next set of leaders. Around us probably is the next governor of Nairobi, probably is the next president within this place. How do we move towards ensuring, like, we may have the issue, yes, but we are working towards remedying it?
You're right, because institutions of education have a role to play. At university level, higher education below university level, high school, primary school, and even elementary stage of learning. Right from the day a child goes to school all the way to the end, but most importantly also from home, because home is also another place where people learn values. And the question here is, what can these institutions do? Are we helpless as universities? Are we helpless as schools and providers of education? No, we are not. And the role that institutions can do is to inculcate values of honesty amongst their pupils or students or the people who come to them. And by this I mean find ways of inculcating values. Make people to appreciate that as members of society, we rise up or we fall together. So that if some of us are undermining it, if some of us are undermining it through corruption, through being dishonest, through not doing things right, then the boat will sink with all of us in it. And I think institutions really have a big part to play to, in what they do, institutionalize a culture of honesty, a culture of honesty in academics, a culture of honesty in interrelations amongst members of their communities, a culture of honesty through and through. Through and through.
Wealth.
And there are a number of ways to do it. One, of course, is through the creed that we subscribe to. The other is by way of example set by those who are in elevated positions, and also ensuring that acts of dishonesty, acts that undermine that social fabric of an institution, are held to account. Those who rock the boat, so to speak, are held to account. And that's a whole conversation really that we need to have about what can we do to sort of create it, because we cannot be helpless forever. We have to begin doing something about it.
And talking about the results, or rather the solutions, there is something that has come to my mind. We have the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, a body whose mandate is to try and remedy and ensure that corruption is dealt with, particularly within the high offices. We see cases going to the ODPP, we see cases moving, and at some point we hear acquittals, we hear deals getting made. There is something that someone paid maybe to deal with a certain issue that was there within the particular county or place where they were in leadership. And it brings to question one, is it that our bodies, for some reasons, the bodies created to try and mitigate corruption and its effects, are they more or less failing in their mission? Have we failed in empowering them enough to be able to deal with their mission? Or where is the failing coming about? Because you'd find a matter coming up, being followed up, taken all the way to the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution, and somehow the matter would dissolve in an acquittal, or in a manner that may just leave the public sphere all of a sudden. And it brings to question, one, is it a lack of political goodwill? There are so many questions that would be put there. I don't know if you can be able to disseminate one after the other as we try to go through this science of understanding why we have the instruments, but for some reason they are not working.
Okay, thank you. And I think before I break this down as you asked me to do, let me first say that we have strong legal and institutional framework to deal with corruption. If anything, we should not be writing more laws and creating more institutions. What we need to be doing is to make those institutions work effectively by strengthening them. And also, we need to be to ensure that the laws that we have are implemented to the latter. In other words, those implicated in corruption must be held to account. The biggest problem, as I see it, is not really that we don't have sufficient laws. The issue is that we are not doing enough to ensure that we implement and enforce the law to the latter. That is one. Secondly, it's also good to sometimes pat ourselves in the back, that it is not all lost. We have many things that are working. And if you've been a keen observer of what goes on as far as anti-corruption law is concerned, we have courts that are dedicated to corruption. We have officers in ODPP that are dedicated to matters corruption. We have ethics and anti-corruption, which you mentioned, which is doing its job. And if you've been following the results, and I'm happy that EACC lately has been disseminating a lot of information about what they are doing, where they have succeeded, what the outcomes have been, and so on and so forth. And today, for example, I saw a long list of cases that are coming up before different courts around the country that are being prosecuted under the different laws that govern corruption. And from time to time, the EACC would publish outcomes of their work in terms of, we have recovered this property which had been taken irregularly. It is valued at X amount of money. We have recovered this. We have prosecuted so-and-so, or we've entered into an out-of-court settlement with so-and-so to return this and face these charges in exchange, and so on and so forth. And I think it's important also to be able to focus on those success stories, because it's also dangerous to see one side of it. So some things are working. And because some things are working, what we need to do then is to provide the support to ensure that that works even more. So that is that as far as EACC is concerned. But of course, one of the challenges that do exist is that these institutions often are underfunded. These institutions often are frustrated by external interferences. And also the fact that they are overwhelmed by the so many things to do as far as pursuing the corrupt is concerned, because as we said at the beginning, corruption is very rampant. And if corruption is so rampant, they also get overwhelmed in terms of what they can pursue. That said, the question that arises then is, how do you help the situation? My view is, continue to strengthen these institutions and fund them sufficiently. But also on the other hand, and this is where you speak about political goodwill, we need to see it in political leadership that there is indeed zero tolerance to corruption. I don't think a lot of people now believe that we are strong as far as that political message that corruption will not be tolerated is concerned. And I think we need to hear more and more of that, coupled, of course, with other efforts about how we can help our society to be honest, and perhaps more honest than it has been. And that is what I can say.
Mm-hmm. And as you bring that out, you're talking about us giving credit where credit is due. And that is something that is very much on point, because with information and data concerning what has happened, probably the comment will be there. But what Wanjiku receives on the other end of our screens, of our news on the other side, sometimes we have the views of one was appointed, next they are being vetted, next they are passed. Even for persons where there is that question about their conduct within the public sphere, we find that it's more like, from a perceptive level, we see a conveyor belt of sorts. We see someone has gone, they're being vetted within the National Assembly, and they're through. And the questions, or the pertinent questions that come about, are not addressed. So in a situation where such is the order of the day, for lack of a better word, how does the confidence of the common mwananchi in these state instruments
But of course, one of the challenges that do exist is that these institutions often are underfunded. These institutions often are frustrated by external interferences. And also the fact that they are overwhelmed by the so many things to do as far as pursuing the corrupt is concerned. Because as we said at the beginning, corruption is very rampant. And if corruption is so rampant, they also get overwhelmed in terms of what they can pursue. That said, the question that arises then is, how do you help the situation? My view is, continue to strengthen these institutions and fund them sufficiently. But also on the other hand, and this is where you speak about political goodwill, we need to see it in political leadership that there is indeed zero tolerance to corruption. I don't think a lot of people now believe that we are strong as far as that political message that corruption will not be tolerated is concerned. And I think we need to hear more and more of that, coupled, of course, with other efforts about how we can help our society to be honest, and perhaps more honest than it has been. And that is what I can say.
And as you bring that out, you're talking about us giving credit where credit is due. And that is something that is very much on point, because with information and data concerning what has happened, probably the comment will be there. But what Wanjiku receives on the other end of our screens, of our news on the other side, sometimes we have the views of one was appointed, next they're being vetted, next they're passed. Even for persons where there is that question about their conduct within the public sphere, we find that it's more like, from a perceptive level, we see a conveyor belt of sorts. We see someone has gone, they're being vetted within the National Assembly, and they're through. And the questions, or the pertinent questions that come about, are not addressed. So in a situation where such is the order of the day, for lack of a better word, how does the confidence of the common mwananchi in these state instruments
But of course, one of the challenges that do exist is that these institutions often are underfunded. These institutions often are frustrated by external interferences. And also the fact that they are overwhelmed by the so many things to do as far as pursuing the corrupt is concerned. Because as we said at the beginning, corruption is very rampant. And if corruption is so rampant, they also get overwhelmed in terms of what they can pursue. That said, the question that arises then is, how do you help the situation? My view is, continue to strengthen these institutions and fund them sufficiently. But also on the other hand, and this is where you speak about political goodwill, we need to see it in political leadership that there is indeed zero tolerance to corruption. I don't think a lot of people now believe that we are strong as far as that political message that corruption will not be tolerated is concerned. And I think we need to hear more and more of that, coupled, of course, with other efforts about how we can help our society to be honest, and perhaps more honest than it has been. And that is what I can say.
And as you bring that out, you're talking about us giving credit where credit is due. And that is something that is very much on point, because with information and data concerning what has happened, probably the comment will be there. But what Wanjiku receives on the other end of our screens, of our news on the other side, sometimes we have the views of one was appointed, next they're being vetted, next they're passed. Even for persons where there is that question about their conduct within the public sphere, we find that it's more like, from a perceptive level, we see a conveyor belt of sorts. We see someone has gone, they're being vetted within the National Assembly, and they're through. And the questions, or the pertinent questions that come about, are not addressed. So in a situation where such is the order of the day, for lack of a better word, how does the confidence of the common mwananchi in these state instruments
But of course, one of the challenges that do exist is that these institutions often are underfunded. These institutions often are frustrated by external interferences, and also the fact that they are overwhelmed by the so many things to do as far as pursuing the corrupt is concerned, because as we said at the beginning, underfunded. These institutions often are frustrated by external interferences, and also the fact that they are overwhelmed by the so many things to do as far as pursuing the corrupt is concerned, because as we said at the beginning, underfunded. These institutions often are frustrated by external interferences, and also the fact that they are overwhelmed by the so many things to do as far as pursuing the corrupt is concerned, because as we said at the beginning, underfunded. These institutions often are frustrated by external interferences.
Miti miti, panda panda, miti miti. Our planet's future is in our hands. However, there is a threat to the brightness of this tomorrow. On EarthCheck, we share the challenges, the solutions, and the hope.
I would call this a very momentous day, a very critical day.
Every episode, every story, every step we take creates a ripple. Join me, the environmentalist Emmanuel Kutosi, on KUTV every Wednesday at 8 p.m. and be part of EarthCheck. Welcome. Welcome. Welcome back to Law Matters, where we are tackling a conversation and a matter that is not just legal, but also a national imperative. I'm talking about leadership, I'm talking about integrity, and also matters concerning corruption. And of course, you can be able to chime in the conversation through our social media handles at KUTV_Kenya on the X platform, KUTV Kenya on Facebook, and also on our platform, because we're streaming this live on YouTube, KUTV Kenya. We are with Dr. Eric Kibet, the Dean of Law at the ZTech University. And before I break, Dr. Eric, I'd asked for a silver bullet, sort of, a legislation, a direction that maybe that remedy that in your view is missing, or rather you would put your note on it to give the direction that would be able, for some reason, to alleviate the matters that we have in our leadership situation, integrity, and the corruption that is eating into our finances as a country.
Thank you very much, Emmanuel, for that very important question.
Mm-hmm.
And quite frankly, there cannot be a silver bullet for all these problems. And that is for the reasons that we've seen here before, because of the complex nature of these matters. It's deeply rooted in society, and society can be complex. But if you were to ask me about what we need to do as far as ensuring that there is greater compliance, as far as there is a greater shift towards honesty in public affairs, I would make a number of recommendations. One, even before writing law, as you ask me to suggest, is, can you be ruthless about implementing the laws that we already have? Before we went on a break, you did mention about Conflict of Interest Act, for example. That act creates so many offenses that failure to do this, you commit an offense. Failure to do this, a public officer commits an offense. Anti-Corruption and Economic Crimes Act creates again a long list of offenses. And many of these other laws also create a wide range of offenses on matters that concern corruption. So the beginning point is, be ruthless about punishing breaches of the law. And that itself does not take another law. It takes political goodwill, as you mentioned, so that then there can be effective enforcement of the law. But secondly, if you insist, what else can we do to ensure that we up our game as far as anti-corruption is concerned? I would say, in matters of appointment to public offices, lower the threshold of what you would consider to be unsuitability for public offices. And if I take you to history a bit, in the year 2012, 2013, the High Court, in a decision that has become famous in the law relating to ethics and integrity and appointment to public offices, created a threshold that sort of created hope as far as appointments is concerned. In that case, the High Court said, if there is an inquiry that is pending, if there are questions about the integrity of an officer to a public office, there is something that we are hearing but it has not been resolved, then you are not fit to hold office. We will keep you aside. Let that matter first be resolved before we can think about appointing you to public office. And the High Court, in that decision, dealing with the appointment, as it were, at the time, and that was to the chairperson of Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, said, if there is a pending inquiry that was not resolved, then maybe let's not be in a hurry. Let's first finish that, and then if you pass the test, then you can get appointed. That is to be contrasted with the other position to say that the Constitution guarantees the right to fair trial. And therefore, if there is a charge or if there is a suspicion, but you have not been convicted, and even if you've not been convicted, you have not exhausted all avenues of appeal, then you are still clean. You see, those are two quite contrasting schools of thought. And the one that was rather announced by the court in Mumo Matemu at the High Court was one that really put the threshold very high, and then saying as long as there is an unresolved issue, then one is not suitable for appointment. So my silver bullet would be adopt the threshold and the reasoning as explained by the High Court in Mumo Matemu case, which I have just explained. I say the High Court because, of course, later on, that reasoning was overturned on appeal by the Court of Appeal.
Okay. Well, that is well put. You're not the only guest here. I am also one. And something that I've come to notice is that the Law Matters show is more or less an open lecture. And we do have questions, particularly from the audience, concerning various matters that maybe I have not been able to touch on and maybe we've not been able to discuss about. So I'm going to engage the audience. Kindly just raise your hands so that I can know who has a question for Daktari. Kindly.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Kibuwa Regan, a finalist in this institution. And my question is, capitalism or socialism, the end goal is service delivery. You've given the bread example and the honesty issue. So do we think if Kenya focused on economic and social rights, which will lead to better service delivery, that it would to some extent reduce the cases of corruption? Because if I have bread and butter on my table, I wouldn't have to go on and steal public funds so that I can accentuate my need for these things or fulfill my need for these things.
Okay. Another question?
Okay. Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Andati Abuya. I'm also a finalist in this institution. And I had a question to you, Daktari. So maybe if you can clarify or enlighten myself and other members of the public on the measures that have been put in place to regulate corruption in this sense. Like, for example, yesterday we had National Police Service conducting their recruitment. So the knowledge I have on matters corruption is not the same knowledge as a person from the village has. So maybe if you can elaborate a bit on the measures that have been put in place to also help a person who comes from the village to know that corruption starts with the giver and not only the receiver. Thank you.
Thank you, Andati. One last question for the interest of time.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Clifford Minor, a third-year law student. And my question to you, Dr. Kibet, thank you so much for even quoting the good book. It's a really good book. And is there light at the end of this treacherous tunnel? Because I believe this disease goes to the roots of our moral fabric. I believe it's even in our schools here, basically. Campus politics are usually dirty. There must be handouts for you to give a vote to some particular person. It's in our schools. How can we as law students anticipate for this disease to be eradicated, yet it starts at the bedrock of our institutions? So, Daktari, is there light at the end of the tunnel, or am I studying law in a lawless country? Yes.
Handle them quite quickly.
Yeah,
Daktari,
thank you.
just for time.
Thank you. Let's start with the first question. I think that you asked, and you said if we guaranteed people socioeconomic rights, everybody has enough food, has shelter, needs are reduced, so people are not needy, then they may not need to be corrupt. It's a good thing if we can ensure that we guarantee people the basics: food, shelter, healthcare, the very basic, as Article 43 of the Constitution do guarantee. It would be good. But that said, I don't think that will be the silver bullet for corruption, because that question then necessarily means that the reason why people are corrupt is because they are needy, is because they lack the basics, which is not true. The mega scandals of corruption that we know are carried out by people who are not struggling with needs of food, shelter, and the likes. It's a question of greed and not need. Now, coming to your question, Andati, I'm happy that you asked that question. It's true, and it's important that we enlighten the public so that they know their role in fight against corruption, that we should enlighten the public to also know their part and to know that this is wrong, and offering a bribe, for example, is wrong. But that said, I think if the society was moral, that they're just honest at the core, then they don't even need to know what the law is. You see that? I say that because you are law students, but that doesn't mean you know all the laws. But you observe the law. Why? Possibly because you are a moral person. So whether you know the law or not, you will still find yourself doing the right thing. And I think that is where our focus should be. But finally, to speak to your question, is there light at the end of the tunnel? I think that's a question for us to answer ourselves. In what I quoted initially, and I'm happy that you bring it up, the same author says that thanks be to God that through him we have victory. Him, he had a solution. I think for us, Kenya, we are our own saviors. We don't have another savior other than ourselves. And so if we don't change, then things will not be good. And I think we have that opportunity to speak to each other and accept that we need to do something about it.
Indeed.
That's where I can leave it.
Indeed, we need to do something about it. We are pressed for time, Daktari. Thank you very much. A profound thank you also to you for being part of the Law Matters show today. Of course, you keep the conversation going on our social media handles, and it has been a very eventful class. Guys, applause as we end it. Kindly. Thank you.